Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kryptonized. Joining me all the way from Hong Kong is Sean Lee, co-founder of the Odsy Network, and they're doing something remarkable. So normally we don't have company founders talk about what they're doing, but this is something unique, so we're making an exception. And Sean is obviously very involved in crypto, so I want to hear his perspectives on things like regulation. So with that, Sean, will you give a brief introduction of yourself, and we'll jump right into it after that.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Very glad to be talking about new concepts in crypto. I mean, this industry has been evolving very rapidly, and obviously we've seen the rise and fall from a market perspective, but certainly that doesn't stop innovation from happening, including new things that are coming into this space. And we'll talk a bit more about the Odsy Network in a bit. My background has always been in technologies. I've worked most of my life in commercial technology in the distributed computing space. Spent a lot of time working on data center infrastructure, cloud computing, open source software development, and then the last few years being in blockchain and crypto. Before I co-founded the Odsy Network, I was actually the CEO of the Algorand Foundation, and I ran the operations globally and built really the ecosystem from ground up to be now one of the top chains from a volume, transactional volume perspective, and also the number of wallets that are on chain. So it was a very good experience, and that led me to wanting to identify co-founders where we have the right synergy and the right ideas around creating something new, maybe a missing gap in where crypto is, so we can innovate and continue to help push the industry forward in however small contributions that we can do.
Well, all these small contributions add up, and there's a lot to be done in simplifying, getting people onboarded with crypto. It's still way too complicated with too many buzzwords and too many projects where people don't know whether it's good, bad, and somewhere in between. So with that, you've come up with a concept called the Dwallet. Now, can you explain to people that are watching what a Dwallet is?
Certainly. So I'm going to give a one-liner first, and then I'm going to explain kind of the problem in which I came up with our thesis. So a Dwallet stands for Dynamic Decentralized Wallet. Now, of course, we use the word Dwallet just to kind of take a page out of D app, right? D app, decentralized app, so Dwallet, decentralized wallet. Now, this Dwallet, first of all, it's not a wallet app. Like when most people think about wallets, they're thinking about an app. Maybe it's a browser extension, maybe it's a mobile app, but it's where I interact with my digital assets. A Dwallet is actually a primitive, a blockchain primitive that lives on chain. And this Dwallet actually allows it to be programmable, and also, and here's an important aspect, transferable, which means that for the first time ever, you could have a wallet with assets coming from different chains that could potentially be transferred in one shot. Think about portfolios of NFTs. Think about tokens that you've collected from various different sources or projects, and maybe there are use cases where you want to transfer that as a whole. So that's what really a Dwallet is. Now, before I go into more detail about the network, let's talk about why we even thought about this in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So my co-founders and I, we're really thinking, what is one of the missing gaps in crypto these days, right? We've got kind of the scalability problem pretty much solved, right? Every new chain that comes out, they're talking about however many hundreds of thousands of TPS and so on and so forth. I mean, the reality is you don't have that much transaction running on blockchain these days. So pushing it up there, it's great, but is it useful? I mean, that's debatable. People have talked about blockchain securities. People have talked about decentralization, the blockchain trilemma, right? But there's one aspect that continued to be missing, and that's access to digital assets. Now, access not only on a single chain, but access to multi-chain. Now, if you think about access today, access is actually quite binary. What do I mean by that? That means when you have a Ethereum or a Polygon or whichever chain it is, there's usually a decentralized wallet that you can use. Metamask, for example, right? You own the key, you own the access, and you get access to assets that are sitting on that chain. It's usually a single ecosystem, but it's fully decentralized. You own it, which is the premise of how blockchain came out in the first place. But when it comes to multi-chain assets, from an ownership and access perspective, well, a lot of that paradigm doesn't quite work because there's no facility that gives you a decentralized wallet that can plug you into various different chains. So users then have to go to centralized solutions, centralized wallets, centralized custodians. Nothing wrong with it, right? Nothing wrong with it. These platforms provide a lot of good facilities. They have various different operating procedures and business models. But then you're essentially giving your asset away, right? Almost like what you do with a bank, right? You have these assets, you want them to manage your keys for you, you want them to set policies for you. Then, well, the first thing they ask you to do is transfer your assets into a designated address that you don't own, they own, right? So now you transfer them up in exchange for the services that they give to you, right? Again, nothing wrong with it. You can debate, good or bad or whatever. What we're doing with the D-Wallet is bringing those two things together. A decentralized wallet that allows you to have granular level of access control, things like spending limits, whitelisting, and whatnot that you get from a centralized solution, but you get it on a decentralized wallet, and then at the same time is living on chain and it's transferable. So this is a entirely new concept that have never been done before. This is a challenge that our co-founders really want to take on because we strongly believe that the world that we live in is a multi-chain world, increasingly more so, and providing universal access to assets that you have on different chains should be something that's very easy and efficient and then done once rather than many times. Mm-hmm. And that's the premise of what we're trying to build.
So, doesn't Metamask do some of this? And how are you different from Metamask?
Great question. So first of all, Metamask is a user interface, right? It's an interface that allows you to interact with your mostly ERC, related assets, but they also support BNB and Polygon, layer 2s and so on. They are predominantly a user interface, and it is decentralized, right? That's why it has most of the users that are using that wallet. D-Wallet is not a user interface. In fact, we can actually have Metamask, of course we have to work with them, to support the D-Wallet. D-Wallet is almost a primitive that lives on chain that allows you to set your policies that the application on top, like Metamask or any other wallet or custodian operator, can interact with. So in other words, if you've got a D-Wallet that you have set up, you can use Metamask, you can use Trust Wallet, you could use any other wallet as long as they support the D-Wallet. In this case, you as a user can actually choose the best experience and the best service that you want without having to customize and move assets all over the place. You have it in one place. All you're doing is giving access to an application sitting on top to interact with the assets and the keys that you have managed in the wallet itself.
Okay. So, explain how I get my crypto and NFTs, I presume, from one wallet that you support to another. Is it point and click, or how does that work?
Great question. So essentially, this is how it works, right? Within the D-Wallet, again, it's a primitive that's lived on chain. So within the D-Wallet, it has addresses that belong to various different chains that we support, right? And on day one, because of the signing mechanism that we use, it will be pretty much 90+% of the blockchain out there. So we don't actually have to integrate blockchain by blockchain. We should be able to bring it all together. So once you have assets on those chains that you are using the D-Wallet construct to manage, then essentially what happens is, let's say you're using wallet A. Wallet A interacts with the D-Wallet, and then when you go to wallet A and say, I want to send 10 ETH to Mark, right? So when you issue that, and let's say I have a policy in my D-Wallet that says, well, my spending limit, I'm trying to protect myself, right? Yeah. My spending limit is only actually every transaction, only 5 ETH. I want to make sure I don't do anything wrong. So when you issue from the application to the D-Wallet, I want to send 10 ETH to Mark, well, that access control, that policy is going to kick in and say, Sean, actually, you set the policy yourself that you cannot do that, right? Do you want to tweak the policy, or is this something that you want to do on two separate transactions, or whatever it is, right? So that's an example of basically having two layers, one that controls your authentication, your biometrics, and all of that, and the user interface, and then a primitive that lives under here. But the same thing applies. If you use wallet B and you want to also interact with it, the same policy stays here. It's not locked in the individual application, but it's actually at the blockchain layer. So it makes the experience actually a lot more transparent, and it makes, from a user perspective, give you a lot more flexibility rather than getting locked in from one platform or another.
Okay, and how are the transaction fees being calculated or charged, or is there none with this application?
Well, we live in blockchain, permission in blockchains. There's gas fee, right? This is as fundamental as blockchain itself. Yeah. So this is not a way, this is not a layer 2 that trying to aggregate different transactions together for the purpose of trying to make things more efficient from a cost perspective. This is not that. If you are signing a transaction on Ethereum, you have to pay Ethereum fees. If you're signing a transaction on Polygon, you have to pay Polygon fees. What we're doing is basically saying before you actually sign that transaction, there are policies that you have already set up. Do those policies match up? Can you actually sign that transaction? And if you can, then go ahead, right? So it's that extra layer of security and protection that we're bringing, but this is not to minimize gas fee, transactions and so on and so forth. This is not that at all. Now, of course, here's an interesting thing, though. A couple of the investors that we work with says, well, what if you wrap Bitcoin, for example, right? No, now most people wrap Bitcoin to bring value from one chain to another, right? But what if you put actually native Bitcoin, right, into a Dwallet, and instead of transacting that Bitcoin, you transfer ownership of the Dwallet that holds the Bitcoin. So then what happens? Well, then that means you're not paying the fees on Bitcoin because that Bitcoin address never moved. Yeah. All you're doing is transferring the wrapper, the container, the wallet in this case, that contains the Bitcoin. So in a sense that from a transaction fee perspective, yes, there are use cases where maybe that is not needed, but I think most of the use cases that we're targeting, we're still very much respectful of how the layer ones work. Our goal is to work with all the layer ones, not to replace them. That's not the goal.
Okay. And then, well, how do you make money then? How is this all working?
Great question. Well, how does Ethereum make money, right? It's the same thing. It's a layer 1. There are transactions that are happening on our blockchain. On the Odsy Network, the only primitive that's on it is the Dwallet. Everything revolves around the Dwallet. So the creating of a Dwallet, the transferring of a Dwallet, the setting of the access control, all of those will incur a transaction fee. So the transaction fee then pays for the network operations. It's a fully decentralized network.
Okay, so, but what about the management of it? Are you guys doing upgrades? Who's in charge of that? Is there a foundation?
Great question. So you might have seen from a few weeks ago, we had our first press release about our pre-seed round. Yep. And that went into, so that went into our R&D company that is helping the foundation build out the network and supporting us in a continuous fashion on any upgrades or any new capabilities that would be made open source through the foundation for the broader community to build upon. Our foundation is set up in Switzerland for basically 2 reasons. One, Switzerland has very rigorous crypto regulations, a lot of clarity around how crypto projects work, how tokens should be recognized, especially from a utility token perspective. And then at the same time, Switzerland also have a lot of facilities and experiences in financial services that can be brought upon inside of this whole kind of TriFi to DeFi paradigm. So we set up our foundation in Switzerland. We're working with some of the leading service providers there to get it up and running. And the goal is when we get to testnet and when we eventually launch the blockchain on mainnet, our foundation will be there to create ecosystem programs, to work with the community, work with our partners to build on top. Just very much like how I was doing it at the Algorand Foundation. Same with the Cardano Foundation, the Tenure Foundation, Ethereum Foundation. Many of them are also set up in Switzerland as well. So that's kind of our goal.
Well, it's good to hear that you're making money, or the foundation is, or the research company is, because when somebody gives you $5 million, they're expecting some kind of return. And I'm big on, okay, if you're going to create a project, let's say make sure it adds value to the community, but also makes money. Else, how is it going to sustain itself?
Correct.
So it sounds like you guys at least got the beginning foundation laid for that, and are going to move forward with it. Do you envision anything more happening with these D-wallets, or are you just interested in, hey, it's another security layer, but also provide some cool features like transferring the actual wallet to somebody else without incurring transaction fees, so you can move a portfolio from maybe an individual to a trust? Would be a kind of cool concept that I can think of.
Thank you for that question, Mark. So here's how we think about it, right? We want to be an infrastructure provider, and we're building a blockchain infrastructure. So that's where we want to stay. We will, however, work with our partners to build things on top. Things like one of our investors already said, as soon as you guys are ready, they're going to go fund another team to work with us to build a D-Wallet marketplace. Why? Because of what we talked about before, right? This is the first time ever that now you can have multi-chain asset in a portfolio that could be transacted. So think about things like governance tokens, unvested tokens. Right now, that may not have any liquidity unless you go to an OTC desk of some sort, right? But without, if you have these unvested tokens in a D-Wallet, you could create a market for it, right? That still follows the same lockup period, vesting schedule, but the ownership of those have changed. Or you're an NFT collector that have collected many of the apes from across different ecosystems. Now I've got a whole collection of apes. And let's say someone says the collection of all that is greater than the individual pieces. Well, then perhaps transacting a portfolio of assets using the D-Wallet makes sense. So a D-Wallet marketplace could very well be something that our partners can build on top. We are not going to go build that, because if we built it, honestly, Mark, then that becomes we are just creating more and more things on top. Then how are we decentralized, right? Yeah. Decentralization isn't just the technology layer. It's also at the operational aspect and so on. Now, the interesting thing here is I am definitely not anti-establishment. I think I shared with you earlier, I've worked with some of the largest banks in the world, for 20 years. There's a reason why they exist. There's a reason why there are licenses and regulations that are there. So our premise is very simple. The technology should be as decentralized as possible. The operational aspect can be decentralized. It could also be centralized, right? But given the premise that the technology was built in a way that was decentralized, you at least have that flexibility depending on the use case and requirement. So we didn't want to start with one where we're building a vertical stack. We build the technology, we build the marketplace, we build the exchange. Like everything is a vertical stack. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. We're going horizontal, and then we're going to work with partners to build things on top. And whether it's a marketplace or an exchange or liquidity pools or whatever else, digital asset custody, build it on top. We'll work with them. We'll support them. But the goal is not for us to create and dictate where that should go. The community should tell us where that should go.
Excellent. So it sounds like you got another version of this. You're thinking ahead, and you're going to provide some things that no one else is doing, not that I'm aware of. Maybe there's some other projects that are out there. So love this concept. We're going to follow this around and come back maybe in a couple months just to see where you're at, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
What's the release date?
So we are looking to a 4 to 6 months towards our testnet launch. So that'll take us closer to the beginning of next year. And then several months after that, depending on how we work with our partners, a mainnet launch maybe a few months after that. Now, the goal is before we go to testnet, we will have our SDKs ready. We'll have an SDK to build on top of the blockchain, and we'll have an SDK towards how you build a wallet surrounding the Dwallet kind of architecture. So these SDKs is what we're going to be using to work with our early adopters, our design partners, to come up with multi-chain DAOs that have access control and different layers that you cannot do today, or gaming guilds that are working with a number of blockchain games belonging in a different ecosystem, but wanting a single access point to these assets, and so on and so forth. So we're going very proactively approaching everything from decentralized platforms and organizations to potentially even institutions that are looking to create a digital asset custody platform, and would be looking at something that's open source and decentralized that they can use rather than relying on centralized providers. So we have a lot of choices that we can do, but from a timeline perspective, we're looking at releasing the SDKs in a few months' time, and then 4 to 6 months for testnet, and then a few months after that for mainnet launch. That's our goal.
Excellent. Good. And where can you sign up now, or where do people learn more?
Our website is actually very simple. It's Odsy, O-D-S-Y, .xyz, odsy.syc. And if you go there, it's a simple web page. It's got obviously a contact us, which we will, which is where we're primarily using to engage with the community at the moment, and obviously through our Twitter and LinkedIn and Reddit accounts as well. But at the same time, on the Odsy website, we have our light paper that goes into a lot of details around the technical design, the architecture, the use cases, some of which I talked about earlier. We call it a light paper. And normally you've probably seen, I mean, Mark, you've probably seen many light papers, and they're usually, 6, 7, 8 pages long. Yeah. I think we went a little overboard. We have over 30 pages, diagrams and everything. It's almost like a white paper, except my team keeps saying our white paper is going to be significantly more in depth, including research topics that we're working on as well. I mean, one thing I wanted to say is my co-founders are, all coming from the counterintelligence background. They're cybersecurity experts. They're not building a blockchain with Dwallet for the purpose of just managing assets. They want to bring a lot of nation state level kind of security paradigm into protecting these assets. And this is one of the things that we're very proud of, to have these expertise on the team, and to be able to look at it from day one rather than just building another crypto project. I mean, that's kind of our premise and aspiration.
Excellent. Well, Sean, it's been a pleasure. When you launch, let's get back out and talk about any updates that you have. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having us on the show. Very glad to talk at a high level about what the Odsy project is about. And hopefully we'll be able to jump on very quickly. Thank you again.
Thank you. Hey, folks. My name is Mark Fidelman. I am the host of Kryptonized, and I have a special tip for you today. It's Tetraguard. You can find it at tetraguard.io. This is the first decentralized ETF consists of Bitcoin, PaxG, and Ethereum. I recommend this. If you just want to get into crypto the easy way and have some solid crypto tokens that are in this particular ETF, then Tetraguard is the way to go. Check it out.